small bunch today, it would be great to know who else is in the room here with us. So if you would like to introduce yourself with name, pronouns if you'd like to share, and then what you do at the hospital would be awesome. You want to start?
I'll start. I'm Ruth. I'm from the lab. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And what else?
That's perfect. Did all the things. Thanks, Ruth.
I'm Annalise. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a phlebotomist over at the laboratory.
I'm Lisa Peller, and I also use she, her, hers, and I'm the lab phlebotomy supervisor.
Now, I'm Carol Sweeney. I'm the office manager for all of outpatient rehab.
I'm Beth Heitman. I work in outpatient rehab, and I use she, her, and hers.
Hi, I'm Debbie. I work at the rehab over in Catamount Park.
Sweet. Seems like we have two solid teams here today.
I know.
Love this.
A good team. Don't ask where the rest of them are.
Where are they?
I won't ask any questions. Wonderful. Well, we are from Pride Center, Vermont. As I said, has anyone been to Pride Center before? Well, we are located in downtown Burlington, right in the south end on South Champlain Street. And we're a drop-in resource center for anyone in the LGBTQ community across the state of Vermont. We host both social and support groups at the center, as well as having a library with over 3,000 books that reflect all LGBTQ identities across genres, and a cyber center that has 4 computers where folks can do personal and professional development at the center itself. I'll talk a little bit about the health and wellness program. That's my program. We work really closely with the Vermont Department of Health, navigating health disparities specific to the LGBTQ community. So our largest grant is this empowerment project, also labeled as GLAM Vermont. It's a social program for gay, bi, and trans guys ages 18 to 35. And what we do is we put on a lot of social programming and events where we're able to get folks together and then disseminate updated safer sex information. Because if there's something we know, high school sex ed misses the mark for just about everyone right now, and especially folks within marginalized communities such as LGBTQ individuals. And embedded within that, we talk about PrEP and PEP, because we have HIV testing that is free, rapid, and confidential at the center. Have folks heard about PrEP before? Seeing a few nods. PrEP is the only medication on the market that is actually able to prevent the transmission of HIV for folks who are HIV negative to begin with. So taken as a daily pill, it's up to 98% effective, and that combined with ART or antiretroviral therapy, which is what folks who are living with HIV take, we could see the end of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in our lifetime here in the US. So some really rad work that's coming out. Other stuff that we do is tobacco cessation, except we've moved from the model of having groups where we tell folks that using tobacco products is actually very bad for your health. Apparently that's very annoying. So instead we've worked to get them connected to safe and affirming healthcare providers because those conversations are already happening. So we have the Vermont Diversity Health Project, which is housed on our website at pridecentervt.org. And it is a geolocation-based app that gets folks connected across the state of Vermont. We have over 160 providers in there already, and doing trainings like this allows us to get even more providers listed. And lastly, we work with You First, previously known as Ladies First, and getting folks support with breast and cervical cancer screenings as well as heart health. That's just a little bit of what I do. How a safe space.
So the Safe Space Anti-Violence Program provides emotional support, advocacy, and resources to LGBTQ+, and HIV-affected people who've been impacted by violence. So it could be sexual, domestic, hate, discriminatory, etc. So if you're ever working with somebody and you ask them, do you feel safe in your relationship, and they answer no, and they're an LGBTQ+ person, that could be a really good referral to make. We do operate statewide. We have a warm line where somebody can just call us, or we can be contacted by email. Yeah, so we're available here too. And we work a lot with Women's Safe actually through Millbury.
So for all of our trainings, we like to set up some ground rules or expectations for our time together. The first one that we have is speak from I. One thing that we've learned from all of these trainings is that a lot of personal stories come up from connections with LGBTQ individuals or living as an LGBTQ person and what that is like. And all we ask is that you tell those stories from your own perspective, because that's the one that you know best. And then take space, make space. Have folks heard of that one before? No, okay. So there are folks in this world who love to talk and will ask questions as they come up, like myself. And then there are folks who would love to stay in the corner and not ask their questions, even if they have tons of them, which is not like myself. And so with the take space, make space model, we're saying folks who are quieter, take that space, ask your questions while we are here to be able to answer them. And for folks who love to talk, after asking a question, make some space for someone else to ask a question as well. And then if no one else speaks up, go ahead, ask your next one.
With that said, there's a lot of space in this room.
We also like to say make like a lobster, really weird saying. Lobsters, as they grow, they push up against the boundaries of their shell and get really uncomfortable. And then they have to get out of the shell, become very vulnerable as they grow a new one. And when we're talking about LGBTQ identities, there are a lot of messages that we've received around this already. So it may be uncomfortable, and in that piece we just say embrace the discomfort. We're not going to push you to an edge of extreme discomfort, but ask questions as they're coming up and recognize that we do our best learning in that uncomfortable growing edge zone. And also knowing that this is just a starting point. More like a leap, we give you a whole lot of information. You will most likely leave with more questions than answers today. And in that, it's saying that these conversations continue beyond this point. And so continuing these conversations in your team is really important. And lastly, what's shared here stays here, and what's learned here leaves. Going back to that piece around stories, identifying factors may come up in those stories. And just recognizing that there are maybe 1 to 2 degrees of separation here in the state of Vermont. Everyone knows just about everyone, and especially when we're talking about LGBTQ folks, which make up about 5% of Vermont's population. If we use any identifying factors, people are going to know exactly who we're talking about. But those stories are still important, as we said before, so taking the learning that you're gathering from those experiences on with you. Any questions on ground rules expectations? Do those feel good for folks? Sweet. One other thing that I like to talk about is, oh, my slide disappeared. Okay. Well, something that I usually like to talk about there is understanding that the challenging assumptions and bias as they come up. Again, we all are carrying a lot of stories around LGBTQ folks that we've either gotten from schooling or society, family structures, and we may be challenging some of those narratives today as we go through this. So understanding, again, that make like a lobster, embrace the discomfort that's coming up. Another piece we do is talking about calling in versus calling out. Have folks heard of that difference before? Calling out we know really well. It's like when someone does something wrong, we point it out to them, they feel a whole lot of shame about it, they ride the carousel, the hope is that they're going to go and change, and not all the time does that happen. And we like to use a calling in model here during our trainings. And what I mean by that is, I'll use a metaphor. It's like if someone was going to facilitate a training and they had a poppy seed bagel right ahead of time. And so now they have poppy seeds all in their teeth. And you notice, and the hope is that you will graciously let them know, hey, you have a bunch of poppy seeds in your teeth that you should probably pick out, or you're going to look like a fool during that training. And hopefully they will graciously accept that information and be like, you're so right, I don't want poppy seeds in my teeth. And then they'll pick them out, and then next time they have a poppy seed bagel, there won't be poppy seeds, hopefully. Or they'll take that extra step to check ahead of time. A more embarrassing example is like if someone's zipper's down, you notice, that's awkward, it's more awkward for them. Gotta let them know in that moment, and hopefully they will graciously accept that information, zip it up, and then next time, maybe they'll remember ahead of time, so then they don't need that helpful reminder. Sound good? Cool. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of today is give you an introduction to LGBTQ identities, get into that acronym alphabet soup, and separate out who is in the community. And then we'll get into sex, gender, and sexuality and understand those differences. Then we'll get into the meat of the why. Why are we having this presentation? Why is it important to have these conversations when we talk about the minority stress model? And then talk about ways that we can shift our language so that we can be more inclusive. So we'll talk about language, significance of pronouns, and then at the end we'll have some time for best practices and takeaways. But to get us started, I'm going to write out the longest form of the acronym that we can cover during the training today. And what I mean by that is, it's a really long acronym, or it can be.
Can folks see the red?
Okay. time that my S looks like a 5. So I'm going to try to signify that that's an S. Okay. I also feel like you have some of this knowledge already. So when we look at this acronym, what does the L stand for?
Lesbian?
Lesbian, yeah. Awesome. Do you have a definition by chance? It's not a trick question, I promise you.
A girl with girl?
Yeah, so it's any woman-identified person that is sexually or romantically attracted to other women. Yeah? How about G?
Gay?
Absolutely, yeah, gay. And a definition, don't say happy, that is a definition, I will take that, but not the one that we're talking about
Not on a
today.
Monday.
Man with man?
Yeah, so any man-identified person that is sexually or romantically attracted to other men. Absolutely. We've also seen it used as like this umbrella term to talk about the entire LGBTQ community. But we're also seeing a movement away from that, as when we get farther into the acronym here, we're going to start talking more about gender and identification versus gay, which is really talking about our connections to other people. Another piece I'll add is that we are giving some narrow definitions around what these mean. So if you were talking to a woman who identifies as gay, I wouldn't say, oh, I went to this training one time and they told me that you're actually a lesbian. In that instance, and in all instances, language matching that your client or patient is using is the most important. How about B?
Bisexual.
Bisexual. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Does someone have a definition for that one?
Confused, not sure who they want to be with?
Interesting. I'll go a bit beyond that. So when we think of bisexual, we really focus on two. So we think of like bicycle, or bipolar, or all those things. But when the way that I like to explain bisexual is someone who's attracted to 2 or more genders. Really understanding that folks can identify on a spectrum of genders, and that with these folks, they aren't necessarily confused. I wouldn't use that language. I would use it as like their attraction to others is open, very open, not narrowly defined as we use lesbian, gay, or straight. Any questions on that? Sweet. How about the T?
Transgender.
Yeah, transgender. And the definition?
Well, I'm not really clear on it completely. So it's someone that's transitioning, I think, into a different, from male to female or female to male, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Clear understanding that we have is when we're talking about the binary transition of someone who is male to female or female to male. The way that I like to identify transgender is someone who identifies with a gender that they weren't assigned at birth. So when we think about gender, it's very much tied into sex, as in when we assign sex, we assign gender in one foul swoop. And trans is just saying that sometimes we get that one wrong. And understanding that folks may identify outside of that two-party system of male and female, or woman and man, and may identify as non-binary or outside of that. How about the Q's here?
Questioning?
Questioning, yeah. That one's pretty straightforward. It's someone who's thinking about their identity. They may have it figured out at some point. They may never have it figured out. But either way, we'll support them in that process. How about the other Q?
Queer.
Yeah. And do you have a definition by chance?
Lesbian, gay.
Exactly, yeah. We're thinking like, this is the new umbrella term that we're moving to because it is so open. When we think of these terms, as I said, they're so narrowly defined, but queer is just saying, I am not going to check off any of the boxes of what you're asking for. If we're talking about sexuality, saying that my attraction is very open. And if we're talking about gender expression or gender identity, again, just opening beyond our binary thoughts around gender. Also understanding that there is a traumatic history with the term queer, and that a lot of folks see this as a slur or a derogatory term that has been used against them historically. So with this one, I wouldn't put that term onto somebody or onto someone's community unless that's the language that they're using for themselves, and understanding that history of hurt. We see a lot of younger folks really taking on queer as an identity that they feel really powerful with, and older generations kind of pushing away from it, of saying like, no, that still has a lot of hurt and trauma for me, so I'm not going to use that word to describe myself in my community. How about I?
Independent.
Independent. I love that. So I in this acronym stands for Intersex. Have folks heard that term before?
No.
So, intersex, another term that folks have used historically that was put onto the community is hermaphrodite. But intersex is one that has been claimed by the community and talking about the differences that we see with sex assignment. So when I use the term intersex, I'm talking about someone who was born with ambiguous genitalia, or genitalia that is outside of our narrow definitions of male and female at birth. And thinking beyond that. So we think of chromosomes like XXY or XYY, or just the way that hormones are showing up and processed in the body. There are some folks who are born with XY chromosomes but aren't able to process the androgen or testosterone that's coming up. So at birth they would actually be assigned female because of the sex characteristics that develop in that process. Another note about intersex identities, intersex folks are as common in our society as folks who have red hair. There's no correlation between the two, but it's a community that we don't often talk about. Mainly because there is a history of folks doing surgical procedures to put folks within that binary of male and female designation when we're thinking about genitals, and then also thinking some folks just need a full body scan if they were to understand their intersex identities / the way that sex characteristics are showing up in their body, and not everyone does that. How about the A's?
Asexual.
Asexual, yes. And do you have a definition by chance? No. What I love, so thinking of prefixes, A means no. So asexual is someone who has a little to no sexual attraction to self or others. And then the other A, any thoughts on that one? Is aromantic. So thinking on a different way of connecting with folks, aromantic is someone who has little to no romantic attraction to others. So sexual attraction, we're thinking of folks that you want to get busy with. Romantic attraction, we're thinking of the folks that you have those deep, close connections. The folks that you want to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to. A note that I'll make about the A's is that they may identify as straight and cisgender as well. When I use the term cisgender, I'm meaning someone who identifies with the gender that they were assigned at birth, so thinking of that as the opposite of transgender. So they may not identify themselves under the LGBTQ umbrella, but this is an understanding that folks' attraction can be attracted to others or none at all. How about the P?
It's not purple.
This one's pansexual. And the best way that I can describe pansexual is hearts, not parts. It's based on the connection to the person and not necessarily what's in their pants. So expanding beyond bisexual, where we identify 2 or more genders, this is just very fluid and open in the way that folks connect. And then I'll end with 2S here. Any thoughts? This stands for TwoSpirit. And TwoSpirit identities show up across cultures. We even see it here in Abenaki culture in identifying TwoSpirit identities. I'm going to start by reading a short definition from the TwoSpirit Society of Denver, and then I'll get a little bit deeper into it. So this is an acceptance that's rooted in the spiritual teachings that say all life is sacred, and that the Creator must have a reason for making someone different. This gender role was not based on sexual activity or practices, but rather the sacredness that comes from being different. And the reason why we want to bring recognition to TwoSpirit identities is, one, they're showing up in our cultures and here in the hospital. And also that sexual and gender minorities have been around for thousands of years, and based on the culture and society that they've existed in, they've either been uplifted, as we talk about TwoSpirit identities, or put down and have health disparities that we'll get into a bit later here. And the plus is for all of the acronym that I'm not covering in today's training, but don't worry, I have a full handout that has great terminology for other identities that you may come across in your work. And also understanding the HIV/AIDS epidemic and the impact that it had on the LGBTQ community. Sweet. Any questions on all of this? Cool. I'll turn it over to Skylar.
So first of all, I'm just wondering, since this is such a small group, right? What brought you all here today? Is there something in particular you're really hoping that we talk about? No? It's supposed to be mandatory, right?
I think some departments were better about, making that statement.
Okay.
Well, it's knowing how to approach the issue in a way that is, helpful to the patient so that they feel comfortable.
Great. Thank you.
And trying not to offend anyone or anything, not, so knowing how to approach, speak to people.
Anybody else?
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here today. It's these trainings are especially important in more rural areas, if you will, because less people show up to the trainings, frankly. So just thank you, especially for taking time out of Monday. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and watch a video, and I'm not going to tell you much about it except that just watch it, and we're going to watch it twice. And then if you need to step out, there is some homophobic actions within it. You're more than welcome to step out to take care of yourself if you need to, but we'll watch it twice.
And content warning on this one. There is one scene that does depict a religious practice, understanding that for some folks, religion has impacted their LGBTQ identity. It's a shorter part, but we just want to recognize that there are plenty of religions that accept and honor LGBTQ identities, especially here in the state of Vermont.
Just wondering, what did folks notice? There's so many different things happening at once in this video.
All the different groups accepting and not accepting and
Yeah, okay. So,
Color,
color, what did you notice about the color?
a lot of different colors, rainbows, all colors.
Okay, so acceptance and discrimination,
Mhm.
lots of color, rainbow. Also differences, like contrasting color. There's places where it's just black and white, and then there's places where it's rainbow, and the difference in experience of the person in those different spaces, right? What else did folks notice?
There was anger, love, caring,
Okay.
resentment, I don't know, there's a bunch of emotions.
Yeah, totally. Kind of all over the place. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Anything else that stood out? Usually folks, there's things that come up in the family scene or the church scene.
I think it just told a story right from the get-go, from like him telling his father that maybe he was gay and his father not liking it and making him go to a church
Yeah.
and being maybe taken away and then accepted in another community where they were dancing joyfully and everything, and it just seemed like it flowed like a little story.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the cool parts about doing a video at towards the beginning of these trainings is because they're so based off of perception. Like your experience of that video is so different than my experience or other people's experiences in this room, right? But yes, that's absolutely like one common experience of that video. Right?
And then at the end, he looks totally confident and he's okay where he is now, how he feels.
Kind
who
of
he is.
collected.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've been through things and I'm with my sisters.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that the beginning picture is all his immediate family, but yet the ending picture was not his immediate family, people he more identified with.
Yes, absolutely. Has anybody in here ever heard of chosen family before? Does that ring a bell? Yeah? What do you think it is?
I mean, just who you choose to have influence in your life.
Yeah. So for LGBTQ plus people, it's really common to not feel safe in their biological families. LGBTQ plus youth in particular are disproportionately homeless because of that. Being kicked out by their family or leaving because it's not safe because of emotional or physical abuse, etc. Yeah. So kind of heavy stuff, and a lot of people do find chosen family. They find people who they do think of as sisters or brothers or siblings, and that they would trust with their lives. What else? I think it's something about
There's kind of a point of discovery, I think, just with the females and the males and the different parts. Discovering romance.
discovering romance. Yeah, absolutely. Like kind of that.
Self-discovery kind
Yeah, exploration almost. And you almost get to witness that in the video. Like, oh yeah, I can do this, I can dance with this woman, but whoa, that guy is beautiful. Okay. So, discovery and exploration. And you also see that a little bit with gender too. Right? You see, this video is actually called I'm Gay by Eugene Lee Yang, so I do believe that he uses he, him pronouns, but I'm not positive. But yeah, there's still this exploration of gender, like it might be trying on drag, like and going out to the clubs and trying to navigate these expectations that are put on you from birth. Maybe to help, since this is a small group, what are some expectations that you all notice maybe in your own lives around gender? Like how are women expected to act?
Proper.
Proper? Yeah, yeah. What else?
I'm a little confused on the whole question.
Okay, so if you